What's up, Canes fans? Welcome into another edition of Canes Insight Live. As always, every Thursday night here, normally 8 p.m. And on here, it's obviously a little bit different of a format in terms of, I do the podcast every week with D Money. We do different interviews and stuff like that. But this live show is always a way to be able to interact with the fans out there, get questions answered, and of course, bring the latest in terms of news, recruiting information, which we will get into that shortly. Let some people come in here as we always do. It's early in the show, obviously, but start to get those questions in. And as always, like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching now, obviously live. Do that if you don't already. Follow us and subscribe on all the social media platforms. Of course, we got to talk about the new one, right? We got Twitter, we got Instagram down pat, but we got Threads now. And we're going to be big on Threads, man. I have a good feeling about this new platform. Obviously, it's pretty much similar to Twitter, but listen, we were hot on Twitter back in the day. We're still hot on Twitter, of course, but Instagram could never really figure out the algorithm like that. We obviously put out the fresh updates there, but I'm excited to be on there on this platform early. So of course, if you guys are already on the threads, if you're not already, I'm sure you will be. But follow Canes.insight there. So I will start to bring you guys some updates. A lot of this stuff, you guys, if you have not already, go to the ATM right now. D Money just dropped some information on there, and we'll be going through that in a little bit. But of course, earlier this week, Marquise Lightfoot commits out of the Chicago area, explosive edge rusher. And listen, I'll tell you one thing: Miami's not having issues bringing edge rushers in right now. Any updates on the facilities? Nothing else than what's out there now. I don't know when they're breaking ground or anything like that, but the plans are in place. So, but let's get into the ATM. Again, go check that out now on the front page of the website. But let me pull up my notes here as well. Okay, so again, this was from B Money's article, but I had a chance to talk to him as well before the show, and he, gave me a little bit of background on some of the stuff. Davon Mitchell. Well, we'll start off the top, right? D Money was told that there would be some fireworks potentially in the next 7 days or so. He says nothing specific, but the last time he got these sort of cryptic messages, the commitments of Cormani McLean and Collins A. Champong happened shortly thereafter. Obviously, we all know what happened with the Cormani McLean situation. He did not end up at Miami, but that commitment was an absolutely astounding win for Miami at the time. Doesn't mean anything now, but it wasn't a commitment that was necessarily expected by many when it happened, right? So to me, and again, D Money talks to the people as close as you can get to this thing, right? They expect something big to happen in the next week. Davon Mitchell, tight end out of the Los Angeles area that D has been talking about for a while. A guy who reclassified from the or is in the process, I should say, of officially reclassifying from the 2025 class. And at the end of the day, the money believes that based on what he's being told, Miami's very much in it, but this is a toss-up right now. It's a 50-50 call with him at this point. Obviously, he's been to Miami. Um, had a chance to see things closely recently, but let's see what happens there. Derek Plaz committing tomorrow, Friday, I believe at noon. He's a guy that I would expect to pick Miami. 6'5", 290. You're talking about a guy that his other top schools were Penn State, NC State, really good programs, but most importantly, have had recent success developing NFL offensive linemen. And with him, it's an interesting one. I'm sure you'll see a lot of stuff come out that Penn State dropped him or whatever. That's kind of what there's a vibe out there that that's what happened. But apparently, the story there is Penn State really pushed hard for him to commit. He didn't do so on the spot, and they didn't want him visiting anywhere else. He ended up visiting Miami, obviously, and the rest is potentially history. So Derek Clows, I'd expect him. I don't want to say it's 100% because nothing is right, but Miami, I should say, feels very good about where they are there. And again, you're looking at a guy who's joining now, Juan Minaya, who we had on the podcast a few weeks ago. And these are projectable body types 6'5, 290. The upside is there. And when you're following up the recruiting class you had last year at the offensive line position, right? You didn't expect there to be blue chip guys left and right, but between Plaz, Minaya, and of course they're working on a bunch of other guys. I know there's been some disappointments there at the O-line spot recently, but I'd expect them to still land, at least a couple 4 stars at that position. So again, he would be I believe, the 16th commitment for the class, if I'm not mistaken. So spots are filling up, but a lot of the high end guys are still up there, and Miami is still available. And making decisions pretty soon. Still have some more stuff to get to here. Um, well, yeah, Eric. I mean, that's the whole. That's kind of what that's what the narrative is already going to be out there. I'm telling you, that's kind of the story with him. Roger Allen wants to know, do you believe we can still get 3 5-star players this cycle and finish, top 3? Yes, I do. I mean, not top 3, top 7, excuse me. I do believe that for sure. And Sean Stewart, it's looking like his class is gonna be dependent on how well we look this year, on the field. Obviously, this is the continual sort of, back and forth that we've had, right? Everyone's looking for that success on the field. It has not happened definitely not consistently over the last 15 years, but I go back to it again. You're looking for double-digit wins, but at the very least, even if this is an 8, 9 win team, which is I think is a little bit more realistic than on a 10 or 11 win team right now, and I think most of you guys would agree out there, right? You need to have a watchable product. Last year's team was very. I mean, this was a team that it was tough to watch some of these games, right? And you're excited going into the year for the offense and Tyler Van Dyke. Um, obviously, he had a lot of hype going into the year, and I'm still very high on him moving forward. But those were not watchable games. Most of them weren't, right? So to me, yes, you need to win the games, but you need to be competitive against the teams you need to be. As you guys see here, got my Storm 18 shirt, throwback, right? What a class it was. We should do a little exercise and go through that class at some point to see what 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 became of most of those guys. Um, but yeah, I think that a lot rides on just the eye test, really, because I don't think anyone's expecting this to be a team that's competing for a top 4 spot or a playoff spot. Um, people are expecting them to win the ACC, right? They're not the favorites to do that by any stretch. But you need to be who you're supposed to be on paper, right? And you play against a Florida State, it needs to be much closer than it was last year. I'll say that. So to me, you need to have those sort of things go right. JR Bar, and by the way, guys, I have Cammy. I'm gonna bring him on here in just a minute. I'm gonna answer a couple more questions here. Bring my buddy Cammy, who's been on the stream before, and obviously he's got a way cooler setup than I do here. But riding with Judd as the sole quarterback this cycle, no, um, that's not doesn't seem to be the case. They have not told him from the beginning of when they started recruiting him. They told him we're probably going to bring someone else in. Obviously, it doesn't look like they're going to bring in a transfer QB for the season this year. So whether it's another high school guy this year or a transfer after the season, I would expect them to bring in another guy for sure. I'm going to bring in Cammy now, guys, and we can start to answer some of these questions together. Cammy, what's going on, man? How you doing?
What's up? What's up? Thanks for having me on again, Pete, man. Thanks so much.
I know you're looking at the Chris Duarte trade for the Kings earlier, man. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, man. I like what the Kings are doing. Love you bringing up the Kings in a Canes. Love it, love it. But Canes Insight Live.
It's gonna be. Listen, it'll be a quick conversation. I don't think anyone really cares about the Sacramento Kings. Other than
Nah,
that.
but hey, man, they're fun. You get to watch De'Aaron Fox next year with Sabonis for the next 3, 4, 5 years, hopefully. So
Right.
see how that meshes. Keegan Murray's ball now in the summer league. Don't know if you saw that.
So we got a question here, Cammy, from Steven Avello, asking about the linebacker too deep, right? So obviously this has been a position that's at the end of the day, they have not had the athleticism, the sideline to sideline ability that you're looking for in the modern day linebacker, right? And you're looking for guys, and this is going to be a defense that's probably more of a 4-2-5, right? So you're not going to have three linebackers out there really very much. I think there's going to be times where you have one linebacker out there more than you have three linebackers out there, right? So, or guys that we would consider a linebacker. But when you're looking at this roster, obviously, this has been a spot that has not been super well recruited up until the last couple years, right? There's been an improvement there. So just looking at it, if we're talking about too deep and you have two linebackers, four linebackers that would be in the too deep, but I think it would be, let's say 4 to 5 guys, right?
Yeah,
Corey Flagg is going to be Corey's going to be in the mix because he has experience, right? But I don't expect him to be the main guy.
Well, I think the answer to a lot of your question is the new guys. I mean, I know they're freshmen, but Bobby Washington and Malik Bryant are going to get playing time year one. I mean, I don't know, how much playing time, but hopefully they, we're healthy and they don't have to see the field. But like you said, I mean, Steve brought up, I mean, it's a great question because we don't have anyone else on this roster. It's not built that way. And that's exactly what you said. It's a great point you brought up, Pete. Mario or just the Canes opting to go to a 4-2-5, staying away from that linebacker. Now, utilizing guys like Cyrus Moss in that edge offense, outside linebacker / D end role, whatever you want to call it. Getting more of those guys on the field, the Nigel Lee Kellys, and less of the linebackers, which we just don't have depth wise. So,
and more DBs too, more versatile DBs who can cover these tight ends and things of that nature. I mean, look, at the end of the day, to me, the number one linebacker on the team is going to be Francisco Mauigoa, without a doubt. He will be, and D Money has talked about this time and time again. He has a lot more athleticism and speed than maybe you would have expected just watching some of the stuff at Washington State. But Francisco Mauigoa, to me, is linebacker number 1 this year. Now, that linebacker number 2 spot, up in the air a little bit. Keontra Smith has had some really good moments at Miami. He's in that linebacker role now. He's not necessarily a safety, or I guess a striker, you could call it, right? But he's pegged into more of that linebacker position. The other guy that you have to mention is Wesley Basanth, who, as a freshman last year, everyone understood that he needed to put some good weight on, add some strength. But between Mauigoa, Basanth, Keontra Smith, Bobby Washington, Corey Flagg will be in the mix. He has a ton of snaps under his belt, right?
Maybe a little Chase Smith.
Corey Flagg. I mentioned Keontra as well, and then you have a guy like a Malik Bryant, like you said, who, as the season goes on and injuries happen, will probably see the field. Chase Smith is someone who's very intriguing to me. I've been a huge fan of this guy. He's a great kid. I've dealt with him, in my dealings as an agent. Really has a good head on his shoulders. Had some injury issues. Obviously, had the shoulder, had the knee. So he's had some tough luck. But physically, if he can get back to the he's 6'2", 6'3", 220, 225, can fly around. At the very least, I think it'd be a special teams monster, right? But you're starting to build some depth at that spot. There's still a lot of unprovenness, right? But I feel very good about, to me, Francis Mauigoa at the linebacker spot. People aren't talking about him enough, the same way people aren't talking about Devontae Brown at the cornerback spot coming in from UCF enough. I'm very, very confident about both of those guys holding down their spots there. So
yeah, you can't fake 100 tackles, right? I mean, that's coming from Washington State, I mean, from the Pac-12. I love Mauigoa. Agree. Obviously, we get the brothers, so that's always awesome. I actually have a question for you. It's more so just the overall recruiting sense of Miami. I know all these Miami fans raging on Twitter when Justin Scott committed to Ohio State, and then other guys, fell through, whether it was Ricky Knight or whatever it was. Other guys went elsewhere. I have a question for you. I basically, my question is it's more so everyone else catching up in the NIL game rather than Miami, not having enough or not having, a setup or program? Because I believe we have plenty money. It's not the money. I just think everyone else is kind of stepping up and getting, now this is year 2. Now people feel more comfortable going out and doing, Ohio State's committing a lot of money, right? This is not the only DT we lost, D tackle we lost to. We lost Tywan Malone, right? The athletic freak out of Ole Miss, the transfer. And so my question to you, I guess, is it more so Miami losing a grip, or everyone else kind of, these bigger programs that do have big boosters and they do have money, they're catching up in the NIL game?
I really believe, and every time the NIL conversation comes up, I really believe this. When it comes down to the top kids, like a Justin Scott, the money's going to be there wherever they go. When you're talking about that tier of prospect, Miami has the money in terms of NIL. These other schools all have the money too, right? But when you're talking about a guy like him that Miami obviously ends up losing out on, Miami did feel confident about him for a long stretch of time, right? I think there's a lot of other factors that go. I don't know what happened in his case in particular, but Miami is, and I continue to, because this is, remember, I talk to people not only, and D Money does as well, right? A lot of this is pooling our sources together, but I talk to guys who are putting up money in the NIL space. I know a lot of what some of these numbers look like. representing and working with guys who have been in these situations, who are getting who are having these conversations with NIL collectives. I understand what the numbers look like. Miami's not falling behind in terms of the availability of funds on that end. There's still a lot of factors that come into recruiting, though. You're not going into year 2 with Mario Cristobal. You always, I think more than anything, people have to realize you're always going to get a year 1 bump in recruiting with the head coach, with a new head coach. Year 1 did not look great on the field. Things are normalizing a little bit because of that. Let's see what momentum picks up now. The strength of Mario is obviously his ability to recruit, and we've seen that everywhere he's gone. He's been able to bring talent in. And he did a year 1 at Miami last year, landing some of the top echelon level guys that he brought in.
There's a lot of time too. There's a lot of time left.
Right. It's just people, I think now, and there is a lot of time, but people understand the recruiting process has been sped up in a big way now. Before it was February, it's December now. And what happens is a lot of times these seasons fall apart late in the year, right? Teams will get off to good starts. Things happen so fast, but there's not these December, early December to early January to late January. The December to January visit window is no longer, it's a thing, but for the top guys, they're getting it done in the summer, right?
Your class is
so it's
over,
a lot harder to flip them once they're committed now in today's era, I believe, right? Once they're committed. So I think that's why people are reacting the way that they are. But let's kind of move on here. Let's see what else we have. Well, I mean, look, New King, like someone like here, New King God's asking why Miami can't compete for the ACC title this year. You go down the list, there's questions at every position still. No one's saying that this can't be a team that puts it all together and wins 9 to 10 games, which I think is obviously an upper level prediction for who they could end up being. But man, you have questions at every position. I love Tyler Van Dyke, but he's got to bounce back from last year. He'll tell you that, right? He understands that. Running back, Henry Parrish has been super solid in his college career, showed you he was a very reliable back, but then you have a lot of questions. You have a freshman, Mark Fletcher, that people are counting on. Let's see what happens. Don Chaney, super talented back, showed the ability to, at least in this spring, has bounced back somewhat from that injury big time. And then moving forward, let's see if he can stay healthy, right? But there's questions there. Receiver, unproven commodities, right? But that's why I'm sorry, Cammy, but I'm just answering New King.
No, you're good. What New King actually, I was about to say, what New King's doing is what we fans is what we get trapped into doing, right? We take a look at the schedule. We take a look. Oh, we see, the ACC, not really anyone, right? Bethune-Cookman, easy win. Okay, cool. We see all these wins, win, Duke, easy win. But what we don't realize is we don't have an established team. You can't just look at Clemson, FSU, Virginia Tech, circle those 3 games, and maybe a Texas A&M and say, oh, those are the 4 games we're going to be competitive. That we don't have a good team. I mean, right now, at least we have good talent. That we have potential. We did a lot of work in the transfer portal, but right now there's a lot of question marks. And just going out and beating a team like Duke and maybe a North Carolina, obviously that's a better.
New King says we're making it. Listen, he said Duke won 9 games last year in the ACC. No one's making excuses. It's just what it is. No, I mean, this is the situation now we're in. Until we're not going to do what we've always done and hype it up and say this is the year. We got to see it. We're being realistic here, at least on the CanesInSight live show.
Yeah, we got to be realistic, man. I mean, they got to play a consistent brand of football first before you win a 10, 11 game season. I mean, yes, you have miracles. Even the guy from Michigan State, Mel Tucker, he did miracles.
Turn that program around quick.
But at the same time, I mean, we know that there's some problems here at the University of Miami before Mario took over. They're a lot bigger than just a head coach, and just so you know, it's tackling them day one, recruiting, getting talent, and this is what it is. I mean, it's going to take some time.
Speaking of bigger issues at Miami, congratulations to Jen Strawley on her appointment as athletic director at Elon University today. Moving on, PC he said new OC. Yeah, you have 2 new coordinators, right? Multiple new position coaches. Again, this happens in college football, but I just don't think anyone's expecting Miami to go out and win the ACC this year right now. Let's see what else we got here. John Stewart, we're going to have 5 or 6 one-score games this year. If we lose 2 of those and lose to Clemson, no ACC championship.
I mean, that's, it could be like that. It could be a couple plays that, determine a season, right? I mean, it really could go a bunch of different ways, right? Malik Rozier, when we went to the ACC.
Tulane, new King God. Tulane went 2-10 from the following year to 11-1, beating USC. That was a very talented Tulane team with multiple draft picks. Not that Miami will have multiple draft picks this year, but different schedule, week in, week out. Michael Pratt at quarterback was as consistent as they come and is a legit NFL prospect. Tyler Van Dyke was not consistent at the quarterback position. Not completely his fault, but there was a lot of things out of sync at Miami last year. Can it happen? No one's saying Miami can't do it, by the way. I've said multiple times already on this live that this could be a 10-win team, that this could be a 9 to 10-win team. You can get to the ACC championship, and if that's your definition of competing for the ACC championship, being a 9-win team getting in there and losing to a better team, whoever comes out on the other side, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but if that's the case, is that competing to you? I don't know that that's competing.
We got J.R. Barr, which what 3-star do you see getting bumped to a 4-star? I could give you the easy answer. For me, it's easily Judd Anderson. I mean, he's going to get bumped up. I mean, by the end of the cycle, I don't think it really matters to anyone. I think he's locked in to the Miami, but I think Judd Anderson is going to get a bump because I'm hearing a lot of schools trying to talk to him and nudge and see how strong he is on that commitment. So that's my easy answer there. I don't know if you got someone else.
Yeah, I'll go with I have 2 guys for you. I have Romanas Frederic, who just committed last week from St. Thomas at the cornerback position. He's a late riser, obviously coming over from Deerfield to St. Thomas. He's a guy who flips over from West Virginia. The thing with him is he's at a position where it's very traits-based. He has traits. He's a 4.4 guy, has the length. So I think he will be a continual riser. Him being at St. Thomas Aquinas will also help him. We have a lot of showcase opportunities. And I think Cam Pruitt, another guy out of Alabama, who comes and is probably going to grow into that linebacker position, him being a safety, but an oversized safety that Miami is taking as a linebacker in this class, right? So Cam Pruitt, a guy who had some big time offers and again just has that body type you're looking for in his position.
And New King, I mean, just to finish off,
New King is a believer in the Canes this year, man.
Hey, that's cool.
We aren't disagreeing that this could be this team could surprise some people, but this Mario Cristobal project it's to me a 3 to 4 year thing, which we're now in year 2. And when I say 3 to 4 year thing, it's like really getting the roster right, flipping that roster over completely. What Michigan State and Mel Tucker did flipping the roster was an incredible thing for them to do it in 1 year like that. But let's see if he can sustain that. Mario's trying to build something to last.
He's saying we got Clemson has quarterback issues. They've recruited Dabo Swinney's recruited that entire team for the last 10 years. He's
Right.
recruited every position. At one position, they might have a question mark, and then
Yeah.
it ends up becoming a strength by the end of the season, and they compete for a playoff. And it's like, even look what they did, with DJ Uiagalelei, who's now at Oregon State, who I don't even think he went from a potential first round pick to maybe not even an NFL player. I mean, we'll see what he does. I don't want to kill the kid, but even what Uiagalelei, I believe they won 11 games. I mean, you throw,
Right.
it doesn't really matter. One position could be a question mark. I just, and I don't believe FSU is Travis or bust at all. I think he's a good player, but I think
FSU has a
they're
better
tricky,
has
but
a
they're
much better roster than people want to give them credit for. Cammy,
for
we have
sure.
Brad Tejeda ready to come in here, so I'm gonna add Brad, and we'll Brad, what's going on, brother? How you feeling?
What up, fellas? What's going
How
on,
you
man?
doing?
How you doing, bro? No, man, me and Cammy just answering some questions. We got into a lot of I want to get into some of the recruiting stuff with Brad, guys. So if you want to, if anyone here, we're talking a lot of team stuff here. But recruiting obviously is Brad's bread and butter. First off, let's talk about Marquise Lightfoot, because that's a huge. I touched on it early, but I was waiting for you to get on here because, man, you win a big recruiting battle over Ohio State, over Texas, and to me that could be a momentum flipper. As we saw, D Money posted the ATM a little while ago, said his sources say there could be some fireworks. So I think that Marquise Lightfoot pickup could really be a momentum changer moving forward. Listen, Brad, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It was a tough couple weeks recruiting wise, but I really think this is going to signal something moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Because I mean, the biggest low blow for Miami recently in recruiting was again the same school that we just beat for Marquise Lightfoot, and that's Ohio State with Justin Scott. And Justin Scott was a name that was trending heavily towards Miami for the last month and a half, and it was kind of the opposite with Marquise Lightfoot, unless you were really involved in the recruiting. And with Marquise, um, being able to hear and talk to him personally, a couple times through Twitter and a couple other places, he is a guy that, he was really particular on his first time ever going on an airplane was to the University of Miami. That was his first time ever being in the air on an airplane, and he remembered that moment not only for an airplane moment, but the recruiting visit itself. He knew back in March, I believe, that the school he wanted to be was at Miami. He talked very specific about once he unofficially visited Miami back in March, every visit that he went on after March, he compared it to the University of Miami. So that was very telling, in my opinion. When you listen to these interviews and you talk to these recruits personally, they talk a lot the same about big programs, but then when they go in depth about a program and make emphasis on things like that, it kind of hits on a personal manner. I think the whole Jason Taylor thing was an obvious answer on why you would come to Miami as a defensive lineman,
Mm-hmm.
but the memorable fact of the impression that the staff made on him, and then in particular a young man like Miles Young, who hasn't necessarily made the biggest impact on the football field, but as far as a recruiting standpoint, with a guy like Marquise Lightfoot, Miles Young was one of the main contributors in making a guy like Marquise Lightfoot feel really at home. Marquise talked really in depth about the moment. I asked him personally, I said, "Hey, Marquise, when was the moment that you felt like Miami was the place and you were going to shut it down?" And he said, "When Miles Young took me into the locker room and I was around the rest of the players, that's when I felt like this was the spot for me. I felt very comfortable, very at home." And I think that plays a big part into just the culture vibe. As much as the trend towards Justin Scott was, I don't necessarily feel like Justin Scott would have fit the culture and the locker room vibe as well as someone like Marquise Lightfoot. At the end of the day, it was a miss. You can't. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You missed on a guy like Justin Scott. But the great thing is this staff has so many other options on the table. You got a guy like Kamarion Franklin who's going to visit for his fifth time at the end of July. You got a guy in David Stone. You got a guy in Dylan Stewart. You have options.
Which both of those guys, by the way, not to cut you off, Brad, but I was going through the ATM and I didn't get to these parts of the ATM. Again, go check out the ATM, Canes fans. D Money dropped that. But listen, I know there's a lot of buzz about Dylan Stewart right now going elsewhere, but the Canes are still strongly in that mix, 1,000%.
It's interesting too, right? Because you would think the two big schools with Dylan Stewart is Ohio State and Miami. What do you know? Just like Justin Scott, just like Marquise Lightfoot. Obviously, Michigan was in there with Justin Scott, but it seems like when you look at last year's recruiting process, we were going head to head with Florida a lot. This year, we're going head to head with Ohio State a lot. You got guys like Jeremiah Smith. You know, they're trying to get a guy like JoJo Trader. You got Zaquan Patterson. You got Marquise Lightfoot.
Zaquan Patterson, they also feel like they're trending in the right direction for.
That's what I'm saying. You got about 6 or 7 guys that Ohio State and Miami are really battling head to head for. And the fact that a pristine program like Ohio State and a program that's trying to get back, you know, on the map like Miami, the fact that we're going head to head with a school like that, and so far we're 50-50. We're shooting 50% right now. Let's see what happens with Dylan Stewart. Let's see what happens with Zaquan Patterson. Let's see.
David Stone, it may not be an Ohio State Miami battle there, but Canes are very much in the picture there. So
I think even D Money dropping today, Elias Rudolph, that, you know, Canes are still going to go after him, even he committed to Michigan. I mean, just remember last cycle, Collins Akeempong, we did the same thing with the Michigan DN. So maybe even him, we could, you know, could be.
Listen, they're working again. This class will be a top 10 class. Regardless of what happens on the field. If they win 3 games this year, obviously it's not going to be a top 10 class. Things will fall apart. But if this is a 7-win team again, right, 8-win team, obviously you have to show some signs of progression. But this will still be a 10-win team. But if this team does go do what New King God says and goes and really competes for ACC title, they're going to be working on a lot of guys that have committed elsewhere. They're not giving up on these guys. That's the one thing about this staff that, not the one thing, but recruiting-wise, you have to give them a ton of credit for, is they are working behind the scenes tirelessly on guys that are still, they may have committed elsewhere, but they're not just going to give up on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on this football season, not just recruiting, but I mean, just personal, you know, whether it's Tyler Van Dyke, you know, coming off a bad year last year. If he wants to get drafted and be a quarterback in the NFL, you got to come off the bad year you had last year and show that you could be in a new improved offense that fits you a little bit better, and you could be that Heisman candidate guy, right? You got a guy in Shannon Dawson who's coming from a different program. He's wanting to get his feet wet in a bigger program and show what he could do. You got a guy in Lance Guidry, you know, who's coming from a smaller program, taking over a feisty defense like Miami, and he's trying to put his own twist on things. I expect it to be similar to Manny Diaz's first year at Miami, and you're going to see a lot of different stunts and a lot of different blitzes from all different sides of the football field to help us with the pressure that we're going to have. And then, I mean, you look at the wide receiver room, you look at the running back room, you look at the defensive line, you got guys like Leonard Taylor, Cameron Kitchens, Jason Taylor. This is their big year to show out in order to get drafted next year, right? You have a lot of players and a lot of coaches. You got a guy in Mario Cristobal that just came off a bad year last year. The recruiting pitch that he had for the first recruiting class, you can't necessarily do that same recruiting pitch for this class, right?
I just said something very similar because Cammy asked me before you came on, are other schools catching up NIL wise? Is that's what's happening? I said no. Because, you know, obviously, look, I hear what numbers are being thrown around, stuff like that. Dealing with a lot of these guys, but, you know, and once they get there, that's what the case is. But the hype always in year one of a recruiting cycle for a head coach is always going to bump you up 5 to 10 extra spots. Always, you're going to get that bump. You didn't have a good year on the field last year, so 100% the pitch goes from really selling, and they're still, you know, selling the hope and all that of what's to come. But hey, it's year one. You know, we're changing things around. It's going to be way different. Now the pitches, you can get on the field in most positions pretty early. But
Pete, I think we're a really, really good program that might be 1 year ahead of the same exact kind of process of what we're going through is the University of Texas. I mean, you look what Sarkisian did year one, went 5-7, just similar like Mario, and then last year went 8-5. Exactly what you just mentioned, right? If we can win 8 games,
but they
really,
competed with Alabama, and they should have won that
for
game.
sure. Exactly. They lost by 1 point to the number 1 pick. And also you see their recruiting just take off, right? Quinn Ewers, and now they have obviously Arch Manning. So their entire team is their program is on the map now. And so it could be a 5-win to 8-win increase or switch, and that can be a huge difference in what the trajectory of this program, where this Miami Hurricanes program is heading.
Yeah,
Definitely.
just from a recruiting standpoint, I think we still need to be patient as Cane fans. I think when you look at our recruiting board, there's still most of the guys that we're going after are still on the board. You're seeing all these other top programs, especially in the state of Florida, get some guys, and most of these guys that they're getting aren't guys that we are going after or making a top priority. And especially Pete, to your point about the NIL thing, I think what you're seeing is the University of Miami be a lot smarter with their money. I think last year they jumped the gun and they were a step ahead of everyone else when it comes to the NIL program, and they were able to offer kids a good solid amount to where we were able to get guys to buy in and jump right away, not only because
Early.
of the NIL thing, but because it was Mario's first year and we haven't had any productivity on the football field yet, right? Now you're in a situation where these recruits you're going after now saw 1 year of productivity and it wasn't good, but we still have the NIL factor. And I think people that don't really follow recruiting are kind of getting worried because we're not getting recruits and they're thinking it's because of NIL, when it's not the case.
Right.
Miami has plenty of money to back up any NIL situation. I think what you're seeing is Miami's becoming smarter with the money that they're using. And again, like I was saying before, a lot of these recruits that deserve the NIL money, they're still on the table. They haven't recruited, they haven't committed to any other program, so we're still in it. Just wait and be patient for the right guys. You missed a guy on Justin Scott, but you got a guy on Marquise Lightfoot, so it's a wash.
And you're in the game with a David Stone and a Cam Franklin, like you said, like kid like that coming to campus for a 5th time, like. Listen, he would be on the Hall of Fame for using recruiting for visits. I'll tell you that much if he doesn't end up coming to Miami.
So just to give fans a little bit of sigh of relief, right? Just not being over like dramatic or anything like that. Even if you were to land a guy like Kamarian Franklin by the end of July and a guy like Artavius Jones, right?
He's another one who I heard almost pulled the trigger recently. Now, I'm not saying it was going to be Miami, but
I think Miami was definitely the favorite. I mean, he pushed it back a little bit. There's no telling when it's going to be, but a guy like Kamarian Franklin, him making his 5th visit at the end of July for a barbecue, that kind of puts up a big flag, in my opinion, where he could possibly commit. Even if you get a guy like Kamarian Franklin, you add a guy like Derek Plaz tomorrow, who's battling between Miami and NC State. And then you also got Devon Mitchell on Saturday between Miami and Oklahoma and Alabama. Even if you were to land 2 out of 3 of those guys, that seem very possible, you're talking about a top 10 class by the end of July for the University of Miami, where just a week and a half ago, we were sitting outside, the 25, 30 mark. Local other programs were trying to troll us, and we haven't even started cooking yet. So that goes to show you the way Mario and the staff works. You just got to be patient with things. Let things play out. The great thing is 95% of everything that we're talking about with this football program, it all relies on the football field this season. And that's what we want at a program. We got to produce W's.
I think what you mentioned is great too, because big fish swim slow, right? So you get a couple of those commits, right? And then all of a sudden you have these big fish at the end who are going to swim slower, right? A guy, it doesn't matter who it is. And I can't
like a Stone's going to be he'll be a late.
You could just see the way his recruitment's going. Even a guy like Colin Simmons, I think we feel good about, but no one once he visited, but no one really.
Colin Hurley?
No, Colin Simmons, the end out of Texas,
Duncanville, Texas.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I mean, whatever it is, it could be. It doesn't have to be that guy. It could be anyone, right? And so any one of these guys, David Stone, you mentioned, it doesn't. It just feels like we're like you just said, Brad, we're going big boy hunting. We're really, if we can lock in a couple of these guys at the end of the cycle, we'll have a top 10 class. And who knows, maybe that'll tip the scale for one of these bigger guys down the line who are making, a David Stone, a Colin Simmons, whatever it is, a guy who is even a Ryan Wingo. I heard some weird, D Money mentioned that there's some weird good news. There's good communication between the University of Miami and Ryan Wingo. Everyone's, crystal balling him to Texas. I saw Wilt Fong drop a crystal ball there to Texas. So I feel like at the end of the day, you're right, Brad. A lot of these guys it might take a little bit more time than it did last year, but a lot of these guys, as they start rolling in, they're going to lead this team, to a top 10 class. Miami's going up, where some of these other programs might have commits that'll drop off, and it might shake apart for some of these other programs.
And there's some other names that I think are very solid with Miami as far as communication, relationship, and just as far as the probability of being Hurricanes that fans aren't necessarily talking about right now, just because they haven't really been too involved in stating when they're going to commit. And that's guys like Asandre Afua, right? One of the top offensive linemen in the country out of Seattle, Washington. You got someone in Zaquan Patterson in your own backyard out of Chaminade, Madonna, right? Chris Cole as well, right? Rohan Marley, his nephew. I've talked to Chris Cole a few times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he's kind of told me, hey, I'm kind of playing the process a little bit slower, but Miami's at the top.
But listen, but Brad, you look at his visit list, right? This is an awesome. He's visited Georgia, he's visited Penn State, he's visited Miami, he's visited Virginia Tech. And again, your modern day prototype at the linebacker position that you're trying to add. I mean, very similar body type to
Bobby Washington.
And we were just talking about him from Alabama. No, and he's committed now. I literally just mentioned him a minute ago. Cam Pruitt.
Cameron Pruitt. Okay.
Yeah.
This class. Okay.
Yeah, this class. So you're starting to see the body types they're looking for.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Sorry to cut you off. I still think Dylan Stewart's another guy who might take it down.
He's
another guy. Yeah,
I
think we're still really in the mix. So sorry, Rad. Go ahead.
No. I agree. I mean, just looking at the current guys that are making official commitments. You got Derek Plaz tomorrow at 12 o'clock. It's going to be between NC State and Miami. I feel really good. Currently where Miami sits with Derek Plaz. We missed on a couple offensive linemen recently, so I expect someone like Derek Plaz to be at the top of the list. You also got Devon Mitchell the following day on Friday. He's a guy
Saturday. I think he's Saturday,
or
right?
Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. He's on the 8th. So he's originally from Alabama, transferred to California to one of the top programs out there. And it's between Oklahoma, Miami, and Alabama. It seems like Oklahoma's probably the front runner right now. A lot of his close friends are over at Oklahoma, but he seems to have a really good relationship with guys like Coach Woodle, Coach Mario Cristobal, and some other guys on the staff. It's going to get close to the wire on that one. I would say Oklahoma has the lead currently, but I wouldn't be surprised if he picks Miami. And then you got guys like Caleb Odom and Kendall Jackson, who's up here in Gainesville where I'm at, who's deciding between Florida, Miami, and Kentucky. He's a defensive end as well. Miami's been recruiting this kid for about almost 2 years now, so it's someone that they definitely like. Me personally, I think he probably fits best at a program like Kentucky, but we'll see where he ends up just because, we kind of backpedaled and put a little bit more emphasis on a guy like Elias Rudolph, who y'all mentioned earlier, late in the process. So that kind of puts more of an emphasis on a guy like Kendall Jackson. But you have other guys like Jaden Jackson, who possibly can make a commitment in July. He's between Miami, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, and a couple other programs. Artavius Jones, who we talked about from Bluntstown, he was supposed to make an announcement, pushed it back a little bit. Those are some defensive linemen that I would look for. LJ McCray is another one that I think.
McCray, I know they love his body type.
Yep. So we'll see what happens, but I like where Miami sits right now. I think we may possibly land another 2 to 3 commits by the end of July. As long as we're flirting around the top 15 when it's all said and done, I think that gives you a lot of power and emphasis to kind of go into the season where it's kind of, hey, you got to play football, you got to line it up and show these recruits that you could win some football games and you're going to be attractive to their positions.
This is the beauty about casting a wide net, though. You miss on some guys, and I mean, D Money said this time and time again. I know you've alluded to it too. You can miss on a couple guys and still have a bunch of elite guys available, which is the position Miami's in now. It would not be a good situation if they miss on another guy or two moving forward. Then you start to really look at it and say, okay, who's out there, for the taking still. But I agree with you, Brad. They're in a good spot here. You have a question here, Brad, and I know this question came up earlier from Sigmund. Brad, what's your thoughts on the transfer D tackle from Alabama? Is he a take or not?
I haven't really watched any of his tape, to be honest with you. You would think a guy from Alabama would be an automatic take for this program, but I would like to do a little bit more research and kind of see. So I don't really have too much of an opinion on him. But I will say, bringing in a guy like Anthony Campbell, JUCO guy, someone who has the size, he's about 6'7", 6'8", pushing close to 300 pounds. You bring in someone like him along with the other two defensive lineman transfers that you brought in, like Branson Dean and Thomas Gore. We have brought in guys to compete with the Leonard Taylors, the Ahmad Motons, to push that room. So I think you kind of have a good emphasis on guys. I'm really excited to see the progression of someone like Joshua Horton throughout a football season, because I think he already has the size and the measurables to really play right away. So I want to see what someone like he does as well. But I think that the great thing about having a defensive coordinator like Lance Guidry is you're going to see a lot of guys rotate in different positions that you're not used to seeing. You're going to see someone like Nigel Kelly play all throughout the defensive line. You're going to see someone young like Bobby Washington play on the outside and play on the defensive line, pass rushing at times. And that really gives you the ability to really recruit and broaden your board. Guys like TJ Lindsey, for example. That's a guy that when I talked to him personally, he said that he has been recruited at, the quote jack position, where you're a defensive end and you're an outside linebacker, and he really enjoyed it and thought that was a great creative way for Miami to recruit him, because that's not necessarily something that other programs have offered to him. And having the ability to have someone like Jason Taylor coach him, but then have the ability to, have the tape like a Von Miller or a DeMarcus Ware is something that really intrigued him. So I think that gives great emphasis on not only him, but other guys that you're going to recruit moving forward.
Guys, we're going to wrap it up here in the next few minutes as it's 8:52, so get your last questions here. A couple things I want to get to. The original Kane followed up the Alabama kid, Jamil. I forget what his last name is, but he did get into an altercation, a physical altercation with a staffer at Alabama. And it's not like he was an impact guy at Bama either up to this point, right? So you understand that Miami staff is doing a lot of work on the back end in terms of character. Everyone they're bringing in terms of the portal, they're doing their research on. A lot of the guys you see, family connections or just alpha personality. Matt Lee, he's a guy who alpha personality, leader in the room. Devontae Brown, they knew the family. They were recruiting Damari, obviously. Francisco Malagoa, right? So we can just go down the line. A lot of these guys, they took very high character kids that you expect to be able to, as you said, Brad, mesh in that locker room, right? Listen, man, we got a Georgia fan on here, Randy Payne, man. He says, "Go Dogs" from Tifton, Georgia. The Canes Inside Live show may have made it, man. We got rival fans on here now. Randy, man, how about Judd Anderson, man? You guys missing on him. He grew up a Dogs fan, Randy, and he came out to your 7-on-7 team camp and won the title out there. So appreciate you tuning in, Randy, but don't come and take Judd, man, because I think he's a guy who's like Cammy said earlier, on the uppity up in terms of the rankings and stuff like that.
We'll take Judd. He could take the two natties back to back.
Well, listen. I would like Miami to take one of these things moving forward, right? He's going for 3 in a row now. Me Jr. is Chase Smith still hurt. Obviously, he didn't participate in spring.
He's
But
good. He's good to go.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to be a factor, and that's why I mentioned him earlier, man. He's a guy that super high character kid, has had some bad injury luck, but he's 6'3", has the length, has the speed that he could be a factor. I'm not counting Chase Smith out at all.
I gotta head out, fellas. But
Do your thing, Brad.
From everything I heard, the only two guys that were coming off an injury was Jonathan Dennis and Devontae Citizen. Everyone else should be fully healthy.
All right, Brad. Appreciate the time, brother. Later,
all right, man. Y'all have a great night.
Yes, sir. All right, we'll wrap it up here now in the next couple of minutes.
You want to get your like and subscribe?
What's up, Cam?
You want to get your like and subscribe in as Team Money?
Yeah, I kind of got it in earlier, but of course, Canes fans like and subscribe not only to the YouTube page, Twitter, Instagram, but Threads. I'm telling you, we're gonna be big on Threads, man. I already feel it. I don't know how it's better than Twitter just yet, but everyone seems to be jumping on over there. McCoy flipped from LSU. I'm not counting that out. Definitely, Lawan McCoy, a guy who, obviously from Central committed to, and the Raw 7-on-7 program committed to Florida State, but
I think another guy, Tavian Galloway, is a guy who's probably a back end safety option for these guys, or for Miami. If we miss out on a couple tight end targets, I mean, getting Lofton was huge. I think, like you mentioned in previous podcasts, listening to you, Pete, he's some guy who they really believe is a top 50 or so player, just football player in the country. So teaming him up with a tight end, is ideal if they can get this guy, David Mitchell, who I don't know. They're trying. I've read a rumor they're trying to get him to reclassify to.
Well, he is. He's reclassifying. It's a very interesting commitment because he in the last month or so, the news came out that he was, and I think D Money was early on that when he was reclassifying, and they were working on that. So let's see what happens. As Brad said, he has a lot of friends at Oklahoma, so it's going to be a tough one. Maurice Lewis will finish with your question here. Who will be a surprise? I'll answer my guy, and then Cammy, you can jump in. Who will be your surprise player that makes an impact this season? It's not a surprise because you're bringing him in as a transfer portal player. But I don't think people realize how good Jaden Davis has the potential to be. A ton of experience. I saw him recently, and he looks the part in terms of having the right weight and size you're looking for. He's not a 6'2" cornerback like some of these lanky freaks that are coming out these days, but he's more than big enough, can play in the slot as well, has played a ton of snaps in college. And we were talking about a surprise, Markeith Williams. I see Paul Kane shouting him out. He's someone that D-Money talked about a ton during the spring. I think he's someone who can do it as well. But Cammy, who's your guy?
Well, this is going to be probably just not the sexiest pick, but I really think our team, their weaknesses at a couple positions, but mainly at the receiver position, especially last year, we saw. I know it was a rough season, and I know it was tough watching that 5-win season, but at the end, you kind of saw the emergence of a guy at the receiver position who I thought can maybe give us some future, and that's Colby Young, 6'5". He came in with, transferred obviously, think from Division II or from Buffalo.
JUCO, yeah.
Oh, JUCO, sorry. But yeah, I think it was KJ Osborne was mixing him up. But yeah, just a guy who he really had potential. He's 6'5". He runs real fast. He can run the go route. He can really beat you deep. So there's a lot of things that he offers that we don't have on our team at a position of weakness. So really, there's a ton of, directions I could have gone. I could have gone with your guy, Francisco Marigoa. But he's going to be real productive at a position of real need. But I saw something in Kobe Young at the end of the year, so I'm going to go with him. I think he has a surpriseful impact. It might not be 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, but if he has like 800, 900,
I think he could be
yeah,
the wide receiver one. Him and Restrepo.
Right. We just need that guy. We need a guy on the outside. If he could be that guy for us, it would be really tremendous. So hopefully that's our surprise receiver this year.
Well, Canes fans, appreciate you tuning in as always. And yes, I believe that is Mario flipping the bird behind our good friend Cammy there. He has the best podcast setup out there, man. Canes fans, appreciate you listening tonight and joining along. Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Follow us on all the social media, especially Threads. We're going to be big on it. Later. Peace.